You're listening to Garibaldi Red, a Nottingham Forest podcast brought to you by Nottinghamshire Live. Welcome to episode 14 of Garibaldi Red, the Nottingham Forest podcast from Nottinghamshire Live, where we are joined once again by Sarah Clapson, back after her long furlough break from the podcast, and a special guest, Robin Chipperfield, live from, I can't tell where you are, Chippers, there's that picture behind my house.
Can you see?
Yes, live from Australia.
Just a reminder of where I am, yeah. I
Welcome.
didn't realise that was in the way. Shall I sit there? There we are, yeah. Good to chat. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Thanks for joining us. You managed to, obviously you're on the other side of the world, but you managed to watch Forest 3, Huddersfield 1, I take it?
I did, yeah. The games that are kind of midday, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock are a bit of a bonus over here. So anything before 3 o'clock that kicks off, I used to get really annoyed if games kicked off too early and they got shifted around for TV, but I'm quite happy now on the other side of the world if they get moved forward a few hours. So, yeah, it's a good week with the Huddersfield game being kicked off a bit early, and obviously Derby next week will kick off a bit early. So the biggest problem for me will be Bristol City, which is at about 3 o'clock in the morning, I think. So I'm not convinced I should be getting up for that one, but there we are.
Sarah, you were a bit closer to the action than Chippers on the other side of the world. What was it like? Obviously, you'd done the Wednesday game with no crowd, but the City Ground game, no crowd. Kind of a lot of pressure on Forest. They needed to win, but they got the job done quite comprehensively in the end.
Yeah, they did. It was quite it was quite comfortable in the end. First half they weren't great, but they definitely got better. When you've got Lewis Grabban up front and he scores goals like that, then you've always got a chance of getting the win. And he took his goals brilliantly. They were really, really good goals. Definitely needed that win, I think. You wouldn't have wanted to go into the Bristol City and then the Derby game without it. But it sets it up nicely now. And I think they look very much on course. I'm going to touch wood and don't want to jinx it, but for that top 6 finish now, there's a bit of breathing space, whereas before you'd kind of seen the teams below them creeping up a little bit and the gap was starting to get a bit smaller, and you thought, oh, they're going to have to look over their shoulders. But I think that there's just that little bit of room now, and hopefully they can go on and get some results this week.
When I looked at the fixtures, even though Huddersfield are down the bottom, the way that Cowley's teams play and kind of, you know, the fight that you expected from Huddersfield, I thought it would be a lot more difficult, and especially with Derby winning as well and teams closing. Were you a bit surprised, Chippers, that Forest won so comfortably?
Yeah, I thought they won it. I thought they were at about 70% on Sunday, and I always felt they were going to win the game. I felt they were in charge. I didn't think Huddersfield had much to offer, really. I don't think they had much up front until they moved Grant inside in the second half, and that seemed to make a difference. In the last 15 minutes, they caused a problem or two. But I always felt Forest were kind of in third gear, really, and pretty comfortable throughout. I think Huddersfield should probably have had a penalty, having said all of that. But if you look at the chances that Forest had and the kind of opportunities to create chances, probably 10, I would say, decent, if not chances, moments where they got into the final third and the final ball let them down, or that kind of thing. I just lacked a bit of fluidity, and I think still a bit of rustiness in there was my view of what I saw. But, you know, fair play to them. They've won it in third gear pretty comfortably in the end. So, yeah, quite encouraging. And it's interesting, actually, that Sarah's talking about, you know, they're ensconced in a playoff place and they've got a bit of a cushion now. I just wouldn't rule out looking up rather than looking down. I noticed Ryan Yates said something similar. Yeah, well, let's Forest beat Bristol City in midweek on Wednesday, and West Brom, who've picked up 1 point out of 6 since the restart. Just, you know, they were away at Sheffield Wednesday midweek. Not an easy place to go at the moment, given Wednesday's form. So, I mean, I think we'll know a lot more after Wednesday, actually, because if that gap closed to 4 points or maybe 5 on Wednesday night, I think the picture would look a lot different. And it's not beyond the realms of possibility that Forest beat Bristol City and West Brom don't win at Sheffield Wednesday. So I just, if West Brom weren't to win on Wednesday, then I think there'll be an awful lot of pressure on them, and there'll be a lot of focus on them as maybe choking at the key time of the season. Now, they might go to Sheffield Wednesday and win 3-0. Forest draw at home to Bristol City or whatever, and then it's all over, because it is right on a knife edge as far as that's concerned. But I wouldn't quite rule it out yet, no.
As we go through the game, I mean, Forest should have gone ahead really when Amiobi hit the post. He was excellent, but he lacks goals in his game, which is perhaps why he's at the level he's at and not kicked on a bit more. But he signed that new contract last week, wasn't it? So what did you make of his performance, Sarah?
I thought it was probably his best one in a Forest shirt. I thought he was brilliant. He was at the heart of pretty much everything that they did going forward. And he made that save right at the other end as well, where he kind of cleared off his own line. So it was kind of at both ends of the pitch where he was crucial. Played a lovely pass for Graben for his second goal, had a couple of attempts himself. He just looked really up for it. And I think it was one of his best games in a Forest shirt.
Should he score more than he does?
Yeah, I think you could probably say that's the one area of his game that he needs to improve on. But he'll always have a go. That's the thing about him. He's not afraid of having a shot or trying something out, even if it doesn't come off. And I think sometimes that's just what you need. You need somebody to have that impetus and that willingness to try and force the opposition. And even if it ends up that it isn't him scoring and it's someone like Graben or Lolly, then he's trying to make things happen. He's trying to put them on the back foot and cause problems. And that's what he did on Sunday.
Forest took the lead just before half-time, always a stereotypically good time to score. Joe Worrell with the assist. I'm not sure it's quite Trent Alexander-Arnold as he tweeted. It wasn't that. It was a good ball, but I just feel I'll be disappointed with it. But Graben gets another goal. He's closing on that 20-goal mark. What do you make of Graben's season, Chippers? I mean, he's obviously crucial. Can Forest go up without him if anything goes wrong?
No, but we've been saying that all season, haven't we? That what happens if something happens to Graben, and it hasn't. I think I'm touching wood while I'm saying all that, but it hasn't yet. Hopefully, it doesn't. And he's always. I remember speaking to him, when would it have been? Probably before Christmas, about people saying, well, what happens if something happens to you if you get injured? And he said, well, why do people worry about that? Why do people think about that? And he's not a player that gets injured a lot. If you look at his career, he's never had long spells out. He had a problem, obviously, was it last season at Forest towards the end of the season when he struggled fitness-wise. But generally, he's not a player that misses a lot of games. So they've got to keep him fit. I think they have one or two options, but nothing is. The thing is, when he went through yesterday, early in the second half, you looked at it, and from the moment Amiobi put the ball through, you just knew he was going to score. And what other player is there in a Forest shirt? And you look around the Championship elsewhere as well. What other player is there that you are absolutely 99% certain that they're going to score when they go through? And from the moment Amiobi put it through yesterday, you were just convinced that it was 2-0 and effectively game over.
Cowley must have been fuming at that defending. That starts the second half. And it wasn't a great offside trap, was it, to be fair?
No, I didn't think they had a lot about them. I thought they worked quite hard, Huddersfield, yesterday. And it wasn't as though they were putting a white flag up or anything like that. I thought they worked and they tried and they did what they could, but it didn't feel like they had a lot of cutting edge or, the final ball, or you consider the corners they had, and what was it, 11 or 12? Sarah will know better than me, perhaps keeping count. But I think I counted one where a Forest player didn't get his head to the ball ahead of a Huddersfield player, and that's their strength. Set pieces, Huddersfield, and Forest defended it brilliantly. I think there was just one, which maybe in the last 15, 20 minutes of the second half. I can't remember who it was, got their head to it. But other than that, I thought Forest cleared everything pretty well.
What's Da Costa like? I've only seen the highlights. I had family over for practically the first time in months, so I didn't see all of it. Is he a viable option as some kind of cover, or are you still looking at Walker as the second striking option?
I don't think Da Costa is the kind of clinical striker that Graben is. I think he offers different things. He was quick and he was lively and he was bright, and we still haven't seen a great deal of him really, because he's just made these couple of substitute appearances since the restart. I think coming off the bench, bringing some fresh legs and a bit of energy when teams are tiring, I think that's a good option. But I'm not sure you'd rely on him to the extent that you do for Grabban, to grab him for goals. I think he brings something different. Walker's another option. Again, not quite in the same sense as Grabban, but he offers something a bit different as well. I think they are very reliant on Grabban in terms of having a main striker, though. But like Chipper says, that's something that they've been saying all season, and they are where they are. So it's got them this far.
Yates got the third goal. What's your impression of him, Chippers, as a lad? Because you'll have interviewed him at Notts and Forest. He's sort of won over the Forest fans and sort of haven't, in a sense. Do you think chipping in with the odd goal, that's not going to hurt him at all, is it, long term?
Well, it isn't. And I was just thinking, as Sarah was talking about Da Costa, so many players are written off by supporters so early. And Yates is obviously the latest example to get a bit of a social media battering. Diakabi has, Da Costa has. And you just look back a little, it's recent history. Look at Ben Watson, look at Danny Fox 2 or 3 years ago. Players who have been completely written off by supporters. Sometimes it just takes players a while to settle in and get used to it. And I appreciate that Ryan Yates has played a fair number of games now. But I always think he seems to get more stick than he's deserved. And others do as well. And, some players just take time to settle and get used to the way of playing. I just wish people would be a bit more patient. Maybe it's a social media thing, and generally people are, but you look at it on social media and, somebody misplaces a pass, it's like, it's carnage. And maybe because I'm not working now and I'm sitting at home watching the game, I notice it much more than I ever did. But, it just seems the knives are there poised before the game is kicked off.
Do you have a different perspective on games now? Oh, sorry, Sarah, to interrupt. Do you have a different perspective on games now, not being pitch side to watching it at home? Is it a different experience?
It's a better view. It's a much better view than it was pitch side, because you're so low down that it's difficult to see the kind of, not the pattern of the game, but it's difficult to, everything is compressed. So it's a much better view. It's much more relaxing to watch the game as well, and you take in a bit more. And but yeah, and it's interesting. I suppose for the Derby game next week, it'll be a bit more stressful. But I never got stressed last night watching it at 11:30 at night. It was all right, and I never doubted that Forest would win the game. But maybe for the Derby game or a playoff semi-final, it might be a bit more tense, but it didn't feel tense to me last night.
Huddersfield then go down to 10 men for what I think we can say was a pretty nailed-on card. I don't know, put it down to frustration, but I think that was a pretty stupid thing. No disputing that, Sarah?
I don't think so, no. I don't think you could get away with that one.
The penalty looked a bit softer. Well, I suppose if it happened at the other end of the pitch and it was grabbing going down, you'd want it, wouldn't you?
I thought the penalty was harsh. I thought it was really harsh. But yeah, I think they perhaps should have had one in the first half with Ben Watson's challenge. I think Forest were a little bit fortunate to get away with that one. The second one, I didn't think it was a penalty.
Brennan Johnson watched because he started again. He didn't last the 90 minutes or close to it. Have you seen much of him, Chippers, in the 23s? I've seen him in the 23s and thought he looked...
Yeah, not a lot.
I wouldn't have picked him out ahead of one or two of the others, but he's obviously an intelligent player. What have you made of him so far? Well,
difficult to see on that basis. I didn't see the Sheffield Wednesday game because that was at ridiculous o'clock in the morning. It kind of struggled to get into the game, I thought, against Huddersfield. But everybody you speak to kind of behind the scenes, and this is when I was there, how long have I been away? 3 months or so, were very kind of talking very highly about Brennan Johnson going forward. And he's another one. I haven't seen any criticism, so there may not have been any, but you can imagine the criticism of him in the first half. But he's a youngster coming through. And there are games he'll have where he'll excel and he'll be really good and impose himself on the game. And there'll be other games like yesterday where he struggled to impose himself. But because he's a young player in the early stages of his career, he gets written off. And I think that's the same for a lot of young players. They play 3, 4, 5 games. And if they have a couple of average games in the middle of that, they get written off very easily as though they are not good enough. And I think it's so important that people give players, particularly young players, time to find their feet in the game and prove whether they can make it or not. Because, you know, it might be in 3 years' time we say that he isn't good enough, or he is good enough and he's gone to the Premier League for £25 million or whatever. But you won't know unless you give them time. And maybe that's the benefit of these behind closed doors games, that, you know, the noise isn't there, the groaning isn't there, which gives players a bit more freedom to express themselves.
When you play that number 10 role that he does as well, like you say, you can flit in and out of a game in that role, can't you? You're not going to dominate every single game. So patience is even more important with a young lad playing as a 10.
I didn't think that the game necessarily suited him yesterday, or suited a number 10 generally, because of the way the game panned out. And it was interesting that Lamouchi made that change at half time, which was almost as if to say, well, it's not quite worked out how I thought it would. We're leading by 1-0. We just need to tweak it a bit. And I thought Forest midfield in the second half were very much better than Huddersfield, and kept Huddersfield pretty much at arm's length.
What's the latest with Samba Sow, Sarah? It's been a case of one more week for quite a while with him.
Yeah, I think it's his knee, isn't it? I mean, it's just a problem that he's had for a while. I guess maybe it's not quite settled down in the way that they'd hoped. Lamouchi said that he was available for Sunday. He just decided not to pick him. Whether that's kind of him saving Sow for games against Bristol City and Derby, or whether he needed a bit more rest, it's difficult to say, isn't it? He's really missed, though. I think you notice, as much as Forest did well and they've done all right in his absence, I think you notice when he's there, because he's a really good player. It's just his knee. It's just been a problem for much of the season, unfortunately.
We can all be managers, Chippers, but would you throw Sow in against Derby after not playing for so long, when players are back up to speed now? Or Bristol City? If it's right that they're effectively saving him for either Bristol City or Derby, then fine. I'd worry about taking a bit of a risk, particularly in a Derby game with a player. Particularly if he were to suffer a problem in, say, the Derby game. I mean, the way it looks, he would then struggle to get back for the rest of the season, including potentially the playoffs as well. It's impossible to answer. Lamouchi knows his squad, and sometimes you just have to hold your hands up and say, well, he'll do the best, what he thinks is the best thing for his squad. And if that Samba Sow plays against Bristol City, great. If it's Derby, fine. If it's the game after Fulham, the game after that, whatever, if he's fit enough to play, Lamouchi's going to play him, isn't he? I think that's, Sarah, what we've seen in the season so far. Lamouchi's not going to leave him out if he thinks he's going to make a difference.
No, equally, like you say, you don't want to take a risk, though, because he can be so important when you're coming up to that end of the season. And I don't know, maybe you get to the last few games and there's so much riding on them. You'd rather Samba Sow be fit for those games than throw him in against Bristol City and Derby, when, yes, it's important, but, you know, when you get to the real crunch games at the end of the season, I think that's probably where you'd rather have him.
You wonder whether, given the injuries as well that he's sustained, whether playing 2 games in 4 days is a problem. And if it is, then I think we'll know Wednesday. If he plays against Bristol City, then maybe he can't play 2 games in 4 days. But if he's not involved against Bristol City, then potentially, I suppose, we then look to Derby.
Does beating Bristol City on Wednesday knock Bristol City out of it? Because they're 12th on 55 points. Forest are 8 points. Well, I would say Forest need 8 more points to make the playoffs. Chippers is looking a bit more ambitiously than that. But if they beat Bristol City, is that them out of it, do you think?
Yeah, if they're not out of it already. Bristol City are a really odd side. They seem to go on these runs of winning 6 in a row, and you think, blimey, they're going to get automatic promotion, and then they lose the next 7, and you think, well, they'll do well to stay up from here. They're just, and Lee Johnson, if memory serves, he's always been like that. He had that run at Barnsley, I think, where they lost 9 in a row, and then I can't remember the exact stats. They came back and they won the next 8 or something stupid, crazy. And he's always done something similar. So I can't see Bristol City finishing in the top 6. Whatever happens on Wednesday night.
Lee Johnson keeping his job by finishing 7th every year at the moment, isn't he?
Well, you say they're there or thereabouts. I think they're always thereabouts. I don't think they're ever quite there. They always find a way somehow to miss out. And from my way of thinking, it looks like they're doing the same thing again. I just don't think they're as good as the sides in the top 6 at the moment, and probably 1 or 2 just outside.
Do you see Forest making particular changes, Sarah, with the Derby game coming up, games that can fast? Watson, I don't know if he's 100% or not. Do you think Lamucci has to make a couple of changes?
I think, you're going to get to this stage now where the games are like every 3 or 4 days, where he's going to have to start dipping into his squad a bit more. I thought Watson looked like he struggled a little bit on Sunday. He did all right. He seemed to kind of run it off a little bit and got better as the game went on, but maybe not quite 100%. So I wouldn't be surprised maybe if he gets a rest against Bristol City. It's difficult, isn't it, where you change it? He's got options. It's kind of finding the right players and the right balance. You don't want to make... he's done it before. Chippers will well remember, make wholesale changes, and it doesn't quite come off. So you have to... It's really hard to get right.
Interesting to see. It doesn't change the back 4 very often.
No.
Anymore, and obviously the goalkeeper doesn't change, so that just leaves the 6 players ahead of that. Does Grabban play against Bristol City? I think he's got to, hasn't he?
I think so.
I think he has to, doesn't he? Until you're in the top 6, I think you have to keep playing Grabban. You don't want to have a slip. Like if they'd lost that Huddersfield game, with teams catching up, then the picture can change very fast, just like you were saying, Chippers, about the West Brom result this week. So I think you have to keep Grabban, to be fair. And then Lolly, Amiobi, do both of those play again, or do you make changes there? Does DaCosta maybe start? Diakabi, of course, available. Fascinating to see what he does on Wednesday night, because if it wasn't Derby at the weekend and it was, say, Sheffield Wednesday at the weekend, then you'd probably go all out on Wednesday, be tempted to name the same team again. But because it's Derby at the weekend, do you do something slightly different? Or do you try and get the points in the bag as soon as you possibly can? Fascinating to see what his team is Wednesday night. It
was interesting. He mentioned, asked him about Sal on Sunday, and he mentioned, he might be available, but Alpha Semedo might be available as well. And that to me seems like it's a pretty strong suggestion that Semedo will be involved at some point as a different option. I'd be surprised if, although he says that Sal was available for Sunday, I'd still be surprised if he starts against Bristol City. I think he might well be on the bench and get a few minutes, but I don't think I would throw him in from the start. With the intention of starting against Derby, potentially. Yeah, I think so. I think you'd probably give him a few minutes, see how he does, and then you've got the Derby game in reserve if he's fit and ready for that. What's your take on the Adoma situation, Sarah? I imagine he wants to stay there, because if he comes back, I don't think he could play for Forest. But if I was Forest, then I'd bring him back straight away just to stick it to Cardiff. Take somebody off one of your rivals, isn't it? I think Forest are well within their rights. By all accounts, he's done really well for Cardiff. Yeah. He's been quite key for them. So if you've got a promotion rival that's got one of your players that's doing really well, you're well within your rights to say, we'll have him back, thanks. Even if you don't use him. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Although it would the player up a lot. If Adoma was around the squad at the moment, the Forest squad, would he be in contention to play against Bristol City on Wednesday? He probably would. Yeah, I think he would. Obviously, Lolly's in good form, and Amiobi, but I think he'd be in and around it. Maiton's a bit of a unknown quantity still, and Diakabi's still
settling in. So I saw Diakabi at Middlesbrough and he was absolutely awful, bloody awful. But I'd sort of be tempted to maybe give him some games, maybe this Bristol City game. I'm contradicting myself with what I said about Graben, but if Diakabi's going to do anything for Forest, he needs to get some confidence and some minutes under his belt. So in a sense, you might have to play a player like that and take a bit of a gamble. But then I'm contradicting what I said about Graben, so that's a bit
No, I'd play Graben Wednesday.
Yeah, true. What are your predictions?
Thursday and Friday if I could.
Jeff, what's your prediction for Bristol City?
Not really thought about it too much yet, but I'd be very confident of a home win again. I will go 2-0 Forest.
Sarah?
I'm less confident for whatever reason. I just think since Sunday aside, since the restart, most games everywhere have been really tight and really close, and there's so many away wins now. Forest kind of booked that trend against Huddersfield. It does make you a little bit wary. But if Forest play well and they play like they know they can, and they get chances to grab in, and you've got players like Lolly and Amiobi at their best, then absolutely they can beat Bristol City. I'm tempted to say a draw, but I'll be confident and go 1-0 for Forest.
I think they'll win. I'm much more confident about this game than I was about the Huddersfield game with the way Cowley plays. So I'm confident Forest to win this one. People will be interested to know how you're getting on, Chippers, since you left. When did you leave? 3 months ago, was it?
March the 18th I flew out, yeah.
Oh, you got out just before lockdown. That was lucky.
Just before, yeah. And just before it hit over here as well, which was very fortunate, yeah. Got very lucky at both ends. You're
living in Sydney now. I mean, just tell our listeners, they'll be interested to know how you're getting on. Yes.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, settled in really well. Thank you. Beautiful city, fantastic place to live. Settled in, got a place to live. Been writing the blog whilst looking for work. Sorry, I missed that.
Played golf today.
Played golf today. It's a slightly red face. But yeah, played golf badly today. So yeah, no, loving life. It's been excellent so far.
Do you miss England, miss Forest, miss that? You know, you had a pretty sweet job in a sense, but everyone moves on in the end from something. Do you miss it at all?
You miss them. I miss the match days, but where I got lucky in a sense is that there weren't any for the first 2 or 3 months when I came out. So it kind of felt like UK summer in the sense that there weren't games to keep across and to watch. It's interesting. I was in the UK for a couple of games, but I'd left Radio Nottingham. If you see what I mean, before I came out, and I watched them, but I wasn't. It didn't feel odd not being there, which maybe confirms I made the right decision and I was ready to go, kind of thing. But it didn't. It's not felt odd not being there. It's not as though I felt, oh, I should be there. I must be there. I'm missing out. I've not felt that yet. That may change in 6 months, a year's time. Who knows? But at the moment, it doesn't feel that. I'm enjoying watching it from afar, and in a sense, having no responsibility for anything to do with it. That's quite a nice feeling after 20 odd years. So, yeah, it's been good so far. But I miss seeing people, and working in the industry, if you like, and working closely with football clubs. But there's not been too many moments where I thought I'm desperate to go back and do that. That's not happened yet, so we'll see if that changes.
What are you going to do over there? Because without getting into a media insider podcast, the Australian media's been a bit decimated. Do you know what?
It has not been a good 3 months in terms of picking times to come here. Journalists are losing their jobs. Sports journalists and news journalists left, right, and centre over here at the moment, which I think is very sad. So I don't know. It might be something completely different. Who knows what will happen? I've not seriously looked for anything work-wise yet. I'll probably look in the next month or two a bit more seriously. But maybe sport, maybe something else. Who knows?
You've got your blog, which is going well. There's some good tales in there. Just tell people. Well, you can plug it, but tell people what made you want to do it and how to find it.
Thank you for the ability to plug. It's sportchippers.com. Yeah, no, that's true, and that's taken some getting used to as well. I have to realise that I can be a bit more commercial than I was. If you follow my Twitter feed, you'll have noticed. Basically time, really. Australia's lockdown was not as severe as the UK's, but there were still cafes and restaurants and things that were closed, and playing golf was okay, but there were some restrictions in terms of the numbers you could play with and that sort of thing. So there wasn't the ability to go out and do things as much as I wanted to. So I'd got hours on my hand, and I thought, well, let's give it a go. I had some help from family to set it up, because that's not my kind of thing, really. So they did a brilliant job, and that's why hopefully it looks as good as it does. Nothing to do with me, that. I just write the words, and it's fascinating, actually, because when I started it, I thought I've got some stories, and I'll write about those. But as I'm writing the stories, other stories come to mind that I'd not thought about for 10 years or whatever. So there's a book in front of me, actually, with a list of kind of notes of other bits and pieces that come to mind. And while I'm writing one blog, something else will happen, so I have to make a note, otherwise I'll forget. It's amazing how the memory is kind of triggered by looking back at certain events, and you think of other stories and other tales. So there's plenty to come, and there are certain managers I've not mentioned yet, and I'm sure I will over the next few weeks. So let's see how that pans out.
What was the website address again? I talked over you before. What was it?
Did you? How rude. It's www.sportchippers.com.
I gave you a chance to say it again. That's really going
You did. Very good, man. Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us. Sarah, I'm sorry I made you sit there and listen to Chippers talk for about 5 minutes, which was a bit rude.
Nothing's changed.
No.
Well, hopefully people...
patiently waiting a turn. Well, the old boy just waffles on.
If you enjoyed having Chippers on and enjoyed the podcast in general, do give us a like and a subscribe on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere else you can get a podcast. It does make a big difference, and we're really grateful, and I do check what people put, so 4 and 5 stars would be good. Thanks for joining us, and we should be back on Thursday, hopefully looking back on the Bristol City podcast. We wish you well, Chippers, and hope things carry on going so well for you in Australia.
Thanks, guys. Good to catch up.
Good luck, Chippers.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Everyone. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Garibaldi Red, a Nottingham Forest podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please let us know. We love hearing your feedback. We'll be back soon with another episode. Thanks for listening.